My son sold my lake house without asking and called me a leech, so I gifted him a secret karma, the IRS audit letter with his name on it. Of all the sounds in this world, there is one I never thought I'd hear in my own living room, my son screaming at me, veins popping in his neck, spittle hitting the hardwood floor we once danced on. I sold the house, all right? So what? You're just a damn leech living off my father's name. This is my house now, and I acted before you got senile and dragged everything down with you. Stop whining, old woman. That was Daniel, my only son, my late husband Richard's pride, the boy I nursed through pneumonia, the teenager I saved from truancy court, the man I once co-signed a loan for when he swore he was starting over. I had just opened my email that morning and saw the subject line, real estate transfer, complete closing documents enclosed. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, some spam perhaps. But my name was there as the former owner. I had been removed from the title of my own home through a forged filing with the county recorder's office, my lake house. The one Richard and I built with our own hands in 1987, the one with the white birch tree he planted for our anniversary. The one with the carved initials still faded in the boathouse wood, R+L equals always. I stood up from the table and walked, slowly, to the front window. I needed air, light, something to keep my knees from giving out. That was when I asked the question, simple, quiet, my voice steadier than my soul. Daniel, what did you do to the deed? And that was the moment he lost his temper. That was when he screamed those words that would echo in my bones long after his voice fell silent. Behind him, his wife Vanessa leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. She wore a white blouse too stiff to wrinkle and a smile too smug to ignore. Better sell it now, she said, before you lose your mind like your mother did. Legacy over sentiment, they always said. Her voice was calm, almost amused. She was not speaking to me. She was speaking at me as if I were already gone. I blinked. Slowly. No tears came, only silence, the kind that thickens around betrayal until it becomes a second skin. If you have ever been made to feel invisible in your own home, if you know what it is to be spoken to like a burden, not a mother, then please, do me one kindness. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I wish I could say, I shouted. I wish I could say I threw something, cursed him, slapped that look off Vanessa's face. But no. I simply sat back down. My hand rested on the polished oak table Daniel once spilled orange juice on when he was 5. I never signed anything, I whispered. Daniel scoffed. You did. At the hospital. Don't play dumb. Medical power of attorney, remember? Vanessa handled it all. You were barely conscious, but you said yes, and that counts. My vision narrowed. I remembered the hospital. I had been admitted for a dizzy spell, low blood pressure, nothing more. They said I was dehydrated. I was foggy, yes, but I would have never signed my home away. I looked at Vanessa. Her smile widened, just slightly. I told him to do it, she said. You were going to leave the place to rot. Daniel can actually use it for something valuable. Equity, leverage, the kind of things your generation never understood. I pressed my lips together, still saying nothing. Rage was there, deep and silent, like the base of the lake behind our house. But I knew better than to let it surface. Not now, not in front of them. Daniel walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a worn blue duffel bag mine. He tossed it onto the floor in front of me. You've got a week, he said. I'll even cover a motel for a few nights. But this place? This is mine now. I am done pretending you're some queen just because you outlived my father. I sat frozen. I could still smell the lavender oil I used to polish that banister last week, still hear the wind hitting the lake through the open shutters of our bedroom. Still remember how Richard's fingers traced the beams of the ceiling he built with his own hammer. I looked down at my hands. These hands had fed Daniel, clothed him, held his fevered head when he was afraid of the dark. And now, these hands were no longer welcome in the home they had helped build. Pack light, Vanessa added. The moving van comes Friday. And with that, she turned on her heel and left the room, humming something tuneless. I did not move. I just watched the dust fall in the morning sunbeam through the window. And I made a promise, not out loud, not with anger, but with resolve. They took the house. Fine. Let them keep the walls. I would take everything else, everything they had no idea I still held. I remember the first time Daniel cried in my arms. He was 4, had scraped his knee running after the neighbor's golden retriever, and he thought the world was ending. He looked up at me, snot and tears and terror, and all I had to do was say, "Mama's here," and the world became safe again. Funny, isn't it, how children grow up and forget what those words once meant? After Richard died in 2010, it was just me in the house. The silence was sharp, but not empty. It carried echoes: his laughter during Sunday crossword, his boots at the back door, his off-key humming when he thought I wasn't listening. I tended to the garden, kept the house clean, made peace with the quiet. Then came Daniel's fall. It was 2012 when he called, voice trembling, saying he had made a few mistakes, with a real estate flip. He had borrowed money he could not repay, from people who would not forget. "Mom," he said, "I need help. They're going to ruin me." I did not hesitate. I sold my small condo in Chicago, my safety net, my fallback to bail him out, the one I had kept as a backup plan, a space of my own, and wired him the money. I told him, "Start over. Do it right this time. And please, learn." He promised he would. Then he met Vanessa. She was sleek, the kind of woman who wore blazers on Sundays and never repeated a pair of earrings. She smiled with her lips, not her eyes. I never disliked her. I simply never trusted how quickly she took control of Daniel's world. They married within a year. I offered the lake house for their honeymoon. They returned, glowing and triumphant, and 3 months later moved in temporarily while Daniel rebuilt his finances. That was 10 years ago. The first shift was subtle. Vanessa began referring to my room as the guest wing. Then my bathroom became shared. Then my kitchen, the one I had designed and maintained for 3 decades, was reorganized for efficiency. I did not argue. I let her move my spices, label my jars, change my curtains. I told myself, let them feel at home, let them rebuild. But it never felt like rebuilding. It felt like replacing. One night, during dinner, Vanessa served a quinoa salad with goat cheese and some kind of walnut crumble. I thanked her, though it made my gums ache. I offered to make dessert my old banana bread recipe. She laughed. "She still cooks with margarine," she said to Daniel, not to me. "What do you expect from a woman who never went to college?" Daniel chuckled, sipping his wine. He did not meet my eyes. I excused myself early that night, went upstairs, and sat beside the old cedar trunk Richard had carved when we were newlyweds. Inside were old letters, baby photos, and a worn manila envelope labeled "Mortgage paid in full 1994. The house was mine. Richard had ensured that. We signed the papers together in the fall of '87, 2 years after Daniel was born. We planted that white birch tree out front to mark the milestone. And yet, Vanessa would introduce the property to guests as our family's future equity. She spoke of renovations, resale potential, Airbnb income. Once, I overheard her whisper to a friend, "We just have to wait until things shift." I knew what she meant. Age, illness, death. I tried not to mind. I kept busy. I cooked dinners. I folded laundry. I stayed out of their way. I even contributed $5,000 from my pension when they wanted to upgrade the HVAC system, though I was never consulted about the contractor. But every kindness became expectation. Every gift turned invisible. Once, I made soup when Vanessa had the flu. She texted Daniel from the bedroom, "Your mom's cooking made me worse." Another time, I picked up dry cleaning for both of them, only to hear Vanessa murmur, "She mixes hangers like a child." I swallowed it all. Not because I lacked pride, but because Daniel was my son. I believed, perhaps foolishly, that love meant patience, that if I endured long enough, they would see me not as a relic, but as a mother. But time is cruel, and in that house, I began to feel more like furniture than family. During a dinner party for Vanessa's work friends, I offered to help serve. She turned to me in the hallway and whispered, "Just stay out of the way, Lisanna. Please, this isn't your scene." When they toasted later that evening, Daniel raised his glass and said, "To legacy," Vanessa added, "and to the next generation, taking the reins." I stood in the doorway, unseen. I smiled politely. I went to bed early. I do not think they ever noticed. The day after that party, I found a small red notebook tucked beneath a stack of mail. It was Vanessa's, likely forgotten. Inside were bullet points titled, "Next Steps, Estate Planning." One line read, "Secure full ownership of Lake House before 2025, use hospital POA as leverage." That was the first time I felt fear. Not heartbreak, not sadness, but cold, clinical fear. Because this was not thoughtlessness. It was planning. And now, as I stood in my kitchen hearing Daniel call me a leech, as Vanessa suggested my mind would rot like my mother's, I realized something dreadful. They had never loved me. Not truly. Not since Richard died. To them, I was a stepping stone. A deed with a name they could erase. And they had already begun to forget that name. My name. Lisanna, wife, mother, builder, protector. But I remembered. I remembered everything. And soon, so would they. I packed my life into a single suitcase. It was a battered green Samsonite from the late 70s, one of the few things Daniel had not reorganized or donated without asking. I folded my clothes methodically, 3 cardigans, 4 blouses, 2 pairs of slacks, and the floral scarf Richard gave me for our 25th anniversary. I laid the scarf on top as if it could protect the rest. I didn't take my china. I didn't take the wedding album. I didn't even take the urn with Richard's ashes. They were all on shelves I no longer had the right to touch. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, hollow, a quiet that stung. Daniel was at the gym. Vanessa was at work. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone. Do not contact, Mom." I didn't expect them to. I hailed a cab from the corner, dragging the suitcase behind me like a relic. I didn't look back. Not even once. The lake sparkled that morning, oblivious. The birch tree Richard planted stood tall, unaware it had been claimed by people who never knew its roots. I arrived at Lorraine's just after lunch. She lived on the north side, in a modest bungalow with wind chimes that sang when you approached. Lorraine had been my friend since 1982. We met at a charity bake sale and bonded over burnt pies and a shared love of true crime radio. She opened the door and looked me over once, then wordlessly pulled me into a hug. Her embrace was firm, no questions, no pity, only warmth. "I kept the guest room ready," she said. "Knew you'd need it someday." I tried to smile, failed. We drank tea in silence. I stared at my hands, worn and trembling, and wondered how I had gotten here, displaced from my own home, watching my life shrink into a guest room. That evening, Lorraine turned on the television. A notification buzzed her phone. She tapped it, frowned, then turned the volume up. There, on screen, was Vanessa sitting on my couch, in my living room, under my painting of Lake Superior. She was holding a glass of wine, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, speaking to the camera with perfect fragility. "We had to make a difficult choice," she said. "Grandma's mental state has been unstable. She started forgetting things, leaving the stove on, yelling at shadows." She let out a trembling sigh. It was heartbreaking. But we had to place her in a care facility for her own safety. Behind her, the mantel had been redecorated. My family photos were gone, replaced with minimalist art and a gold clock that did not tick. The video was part of a live stream, titled "Creating Safe Spaces for Aging Family." Within hours, it had gone viral. Thousands of comments flooded in. "You're such a good daughter-in-law. This must be so hard. You're so strong. My mom went through this too, praying for you." Vanessa smiled through tears. She raised her glass to the camera. "To family," she said, "and the future." I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched so tightly my ears rang. Lorraine turned it off. "Well," she muttered, "they sure polished that turd." I said nothing. Lorraine leaned back and crossed her arms. "Listen," she said, "I worked 30 years in legal services. Estate planning, elder law, abuse cases. I've seen some crap. But what they did to you, that was strategic, premeditated. She leaned forward. Girl, I've seen forged paperwork. Want to dig? I looked at her, at the certainty in her voice, at the rage I had not yet allowed myself to feel. I nodded. Yes, I said. Let's dig. We started the next morning. Lorraine had a scanner, a printer, and more legal templates than most paralegals half her age. I brought my box of documents, the few I had managed to grab before leaving. Deeds, tax forms. The old medical power of attorney I had signed during my hospital stay in 2020, a hospital visit that lasted 3 days and had, according to Vanessa, changed the course of my competence. Lorraine examined the documents for hours. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Here, she said, this isn't just shady, this is criminal. She showed me the new property transfer form, one I had never signed. The signature was similar to mine, but off by enough to raise suspicion. They used your medical POA as justification, she said. But that's for health decisions, not real estate transfers. I felt the burn of humiliation turn into something else, something sharper, cleaner. Focus. They said I agreed, I whispered, that I was confused but cooperative. They're counting on your silence, she said. They made you invisible, Lisanna, and now they think you'll stay that way. I shook my head. No, I said. Not anymore. That night, as the wind chimes outside whispered against the Chicago chill, I stared at the manila folder on Lorraine's coffee table. It no longer looked like paperwork. It looked like ammunition. And I, old, tired, but still standing, was finally ready to fire. The difference was in the loops. My signature always had a soft curl on the L and a slight drop in the tail of the A. The signature on the property transfer document, too perfect, too practiced. It was someone mimicking my name like a mask. Lorraine spotted it instantly. They traced this, she said, holding the printed document up to the light. This is not a natural signature. It's a copy of a copy, probably scanned from something else. I swallowed hard. But from what? She pulled out the medical power of attorney form I had signed in the hospital back in 2020 when I had that dizzy spell, and Daniel rushed me in, all kindness and false urgency. The memory came back slowly now. Me in a hospital gown, disoriented, pen shoved into my hand, Vanessa whispering, "It's just for emergencies, Mom. Sign it so we can make decisions if needed." I had signed it. In fear, in weakness, thinking they were protecting me. Lorraine laid the 2 documents side by side and pointed. Same signature. They scanned it from the medical POA and pasted it here. I felt something hollow in my chest collapse. Not grief, not shock. This was something colder, heavier, the collapse of trust. They used my own sickness against me, I said, more to myself than her. They weaponized your vulnerability, she corrected. And they filed it with the county, which means they committed fraud, misused medical authorization, and if the bank didn't verify, possibly induced wire fraud through falsified documentation. She didn't say it to scare me. Lorraine said it like a woman used to speaking in courtrooms where truth matters only when it is proven. I watched her move, meticulous, calm. Her confidence steadied me. We gathered everything we had and compiled it into a file. The original POA, the altered document, the notarization discrepancies, the email confirmation from the bank. Lorraine even wrote a breakdown of legal irregularities for whoever would take the case. But I knew that paper alone would not be enough. They had already written a public story, one where I was unstable, forgetful, old. One where Vanessa cried for the camera and Daniel kept silent, the loyal, misunderstood son. If I wanted justice, I needed not just law, I needed light. We found a lawyer the next day. Carol Nguyen's office was tucked between a Vietnamese bakery and a laundromat in a quiet part of the city. Her name had come from Lorraine's old contacts in the legal aid network. Smart, sharp, and fearless, Lorraine said. She does not lose cases involving elder abuse. Carol greeted us in jeans and a navy blazer, hair tied back, no nonsense. Her handshake was firm. She listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When we finished, she leaned back and tapped her pen against her notepad. They committed fraud under color of care, she said. They'll say it was authorized out of concern and hope no one digs deeper, but we have enough here to bury that story. I felt hope. Real hope, not the kind you whisper to yourself at night to fall asleep. Carol outlined the plan. First, we'd file a petition to freeze the property transfer pending legal review. Second, we'd alert the bank that they may have processed a fraudulent authorization. Third, we'd prepare to press charges for elder financial abuse, falsification of records, and identity misrepresentation. She looked at me. "You're not just reclaiming a house," she said. "You're reclaiming your name." I nodded. But I also knew Daniel and Vanessa were media savvy. They had crafted a public image. If I fought only in court, they would continue to spin the narrative. They had sympathy on their side. Thousands of people who thought Vanessa was a hero for putting me somewhere safe. Carol agreed. "We need public accountability," she said, "and I know someone who might help." Her name was Tasha Bennett, an investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune, known for exposing nonprofit scams, political fraud, and most recently, a nursing home scandal involving forged end-of-life directives. Carol handed me her card. "Reach out, tell her the truth. She loves truth." I stared at the number. My fingers trembled not from fear, but from the weight of deciding to be loud after years of choosing quiet. That evening, in Lorraine's living room, I wrote the message carefully. "Miss Bennett, my name is Lisanna Morgan. My son and daughter-in-law forged my signature to steal my house and told the world I was mentally unfit. I have proof. I was silent. Now I am ready to speak. Will you listen?" I hit send. 3 minutes later, she replied, "Yes, I'm listening. Let's talk." Lorraine smiled at me across the table. Time to flip the spotlight. And in that moment, something shifted in me. Not rage, not revenge, but a bone-deep clarity. I was not lost. I was not broken. I was Lisanna Morgan. And I was not done. The invitation came wrapped in silk ribbon, printed on textured ivory paper. "You are cordially invited to a celebration of care, honoring families who make the hard choices." Vanessa had spared no expense. The event was held at a renovated event space near Lincoln Park, full of exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and cruelty-free catering. Sponsored by a tech startup that built elder care platforms, the gala was a who's who of philanthropists, influencers, and well-meaning suburban wives with large Instagram followings. The guest of honor? Grandma Lisanna, portrayed by a retired theater actress named Edna in a borrowed cardigan and fake pearls. Daniel, of course, was listed as family representative, but Vanessa was the star. "We wanted to show the reality of loving someone through decline," she said into the camera during the live stream. "It's painful, it's messy, but it's worth it. We believe in dignity even when our loved ones forget themselves." Behind her, a short film began to play. It opened with dim lighting and sorrowful piano music. Then came the voiceover. She was once vibrant, independent, until she wasn't. Clips followed, some real, most staged. A woman who looked vaguely like me, screaming incoherently in a hallway, fumbling with pills, swatting at shadows. A nurse explaining the dangers of dementia. A reenactment of me, allegedly trying to burn toast in the microwave. "We had to make a choice," Vanessa narrated, her voice quivering. "We chose safety. We chose love." The audience clapped. One woman wiped a tear. Another nodded solemnly. Then, the MC took the mic. "And now, a very special moment, a reunion. Please welcome Grandma Lisanna." Gasps, applause, phones lifted, cameras live. But as I stepped into the spotlight, real, alive, unshaking, it was not Edna in pearls who entered. It was me, wearing Richard's old navy blazer and the scarf I had worn the day he proposed. Vanessa's face froze. Daniel stood, half out of his chair, color draining. I walked calmly to the center of the stage. The room fell silent. "I am Lisanna Morgan," I said, "and I am not in a care facility. I am not confused, and I have never burned toast in a microwave." A ripple of whispers passed through the audience. "I have been silent for too long, but I've come tonight because truth deserves its own stage." I turned to the projector operator and nodded. He switched feeds. Now playing, a hospital room, grainy but clear. My voice, hoarse, exhausted. A doctor speaking to Vanessa. She is not in any state to authorize documents. Wait until her cognition stabilizes. Then, another clip, audio only. Daniel's voice. Just get her to scribble something. We'll fill in the rest. And then the final one, Vanessa, laughing into her phone. Once the house is under our name, we'll flip it and send her somewhere quiet. I'm done babysitting. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but shock. Gasps. Hands over mouths. Someone stood up and walked out. Vanessa rushed to the stage, snatching at the mic. She's confused. She's manipulating. But before she could finish, a woman stepped forward from the side of the room. Tasha Bennett. In a crisp, black suit, holding her press badge like a dagger. This event is being streamed, she said, and the Tribune is recording. We have verified the audio, the documents, and the legal inconsistencies. Expect a full article by morning. Vanessa turned to Daniel. Do something. But Daniel was no longer looking at her. He was looking at a man in a gray suit who had just entered the room, flanked by 2 agents. He held up a sealed envelope. Daniel Morgan? He asked. Daniel nodded slowly. I am Agent Brooks with the Internal Revenue Service. He handed over the envelope. This is a notice of audit. We have reason to believe you submitted false income reports tied to a real estate transfer involving forged documentation. Vanessa backed away, mouth open. There must be a mistake. The agent ignored her. We'll be freezing your financial accounts, effective immediately. You'll be contacted for deposition within 72 hours. I stood still, not gloating, just watching. Because sometimes justice does not shout. It walks in calmly, with a badge and a folder. The audience began to murmur. Phones buzzed. Someone was already posting the clip. Daniel crumpled into a chair, hands shaking. Vanessa stared at the ground, eyes glazed. And I? I turned to the camera, still live, still watching. I was called a leech, I said. A burden, an afterthought. But I remember what was given and what was stolen. And now, the world remembers too. I walked off stage without another word. Behind me, the applause did not come. Only silence. The kind that finally belonged to me. The courtroom smelled of varnished wood and old justice. It was the kind of room that muted noise, the kind where even whispers felt too loud. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Carol Nguyen, dressed in the same navy blazer I had worn to the gala. I wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a quiet stare and every ounce of steadiness I had left. Daniel and Vanessa sat on the other side, flanked by their legal team. Vanessa wore a pale blue suit, her hair sleek and straight, eyes hollow. Daniel wore a gray jacket that looked too big for his frame. He would not look at me. The judge, a stern woman in her late 60s, entered and adjusted her glasses. We are here today in the matter of Lysana Morgan versus Daniel Morgan and Vanessa Whitmore Morgan, she said, voice echoing. Carol stood and opened with calm precision. Your Honor, this case is not about family disagreements. It is not about hurt feelings. This case is about theft, coded in trust, enabled by legal loopholes, and masked behind performative care. She clicked the remote. On the screen, 2 signatures appeared side by side. This is the original signature of Miss Lysana Morgan, used in verified documents since 1987. This, she pointed to the second, is the signature submitted on the property transfer form in 2020. The differences were undeniable. The curvature, the pressure, the slant, it was a mimic, not a match. Carol continued, voice sharp. This signature was lifted from a medical power of attorney signed during a hospitalization in which Miss Morgan was documented as cognitively impaired. Here is audio from her attending physician. The courtroom speakers played the clip. She's not fully coherent, the doctor said. Do not ask her to sign anything important until she stabilizes. Murmurs rose in the room. The judge raised a hand, silencing them. Then came the second recording Daniel's voice. Just get her to scribble something. We'll fill in the rest. Carol turned toward the defense table. Your Honor, The defense filed for property transfer using a forged signature, then leveraged that falsified ownership to secure a home equity loan of $140,000. That loan was funneled through a shell company registered under a third party owned by Vanessa Whitmore Morgan. She laid a document on the judge's desk, a wire transfer record linking the funds. Vanessa stood abruptly. That money was for renovations. The judge cut her off. You will speak when addressed. Carol faced the bench again. This isn't just unethical. It's criminal. And it's dangerous. If this court does not act, it sends a message that elder signatures mean nothing once the ink dries. The judge nodded, slowly, then turned to the defense. Do you have a counter-argument? Their lawyer, a man with too much cologne and not enough shame, stood and mumbled about family misunderstandings and gray areas of consent. The judge held up a hand. Save it. She turned to Daniel. You are her son. He nodded, barely. You called her a leech. You stood by while your wife orchestrated a false narrative, leveraged her cognitive vulnerability, and removed her from her own home. Vanessa opened her mouth, but the judge snapped, quiet. Silence. The kind that follows reckoning. I have reviewed the documentation. I have heard the recordings. I have read the affidavit from the attending physician, the financial records, and the statements filed by multiple witnesses, including a former caregiver, who testified that Ms. Morgan was coherent and lucid weeks after her discharge. She removed her glasses. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. My breath stopped. The title to the lake house is to be immediately restored to Miss Lysana Morgan. All financial claims based on the false deed are nullified. The equity loan is frozen pending further investigation. Ms. Morgan retains sole authority to determine future residents, visitors, and estate control. Daniel slumped in his seat. The judge continued. Furthermore, this court orders a permanent no-contact injunction. Daniel Morgan and Vanessa Whitmore Morgan are prohibited from contacting, approaching, or residing within 500 feet of Miss Morgan or her residence. Vanessa gasped. But that's our... Silence. The judge turned to the clerk. Proceed with referral to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation under elder financial exploitation statutes. And notify the Department of Revenue for coordination with the IRS regarding the shell company and financial misreporting. Carol exhaled beside me. I closed my eyes. For a moment, all I could hear was Richard's voice in my memory, soft and warm. Stand tall, Lysana, even if you're standing alone. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. Vanessa stood frozen, her mouth slightly open like a painting of disbelief. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I stood and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. I had not shouted. I had not begged. I had not broken. And the law had seen me, heard me, believed me. I never returned to the lake house. Once the deed was restored, the title mine again, and the locks changed. I walked through the rooms just once. No luggage, no celebration, just me, a notepad, and my breath echoing off the walls. I ran my fingers across the banister Daniel once slid down as a boy, now scratched and silent. I touched the windowsill where I used to keep basil growing in mason jars. Then I turned off the lights and walked out. I did not go back. Instead, I gave Lorraine a hug, wrote a quiet check to Carol Nguyen's legal fund for elder protection, and went to stay in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, closer to the bus stop, and next to a public library I loved as a girl. From there, I worked in silence, not out of bitterness, but purpose. You see, Daniel and Vanessa were so busy telling the world I was incompetent, they never realized what I was capable of when no one was watching. They forgot I had worked as a bookkeeper for 17 years before Richard and I retired. They forgot I knew how to read ledgers, how to follow a paper trail, how to notice when numbers didn't line up, especially when those numbers involved capital gains, real estate, and unreported asset transfers. They forgot that I remembered. And so, 2 weeks after the court ruling, I mailed a discreet, certified package to the Internal Revenue Service, addressed to the Office of Compliance, flagged for suspected misrepresentation. Inside, a copy of the forged deed, the wire transfer history from the equity loan Vanessa secured, and most damning of all, an internal company email, which Lorraine's old contact had forwarded quietly, showing Vanessa claiming the property as a gifted asset and categorizing the gains under a tax-sheltered trust they never, too, legally formed. At the bottom of the evidence packet, I included a single note, handwritten in blue ink on cream paper. From Mom, you said I was a leech, so I made sure the right thing finally feeds on you. I signed it only with an L. 2 months later, Daniel received the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered by a courier, thick envelope with the embossed seal of the IRS and a bright red confidential sticker on the back. He opened it at the kitchen counter, thinking perhaps it was routine, some leftover fallout from the court case. Vanessa was upstairs on a Zoom meeting, pitching a new client. He didn't make it to page 3. The envelope slipped from his hands. The notice landed with a dull thud. Notice of audit subject: financial misrepresentation in real estate income. He stood frozen for a moment, then sat down heavily. The blood drained from his face as he read further. An investigation has been initiated based on an anonymous evidence package alleging misclassification of property assets, falsified ownership documentation, and non-disclosure of taxable income derived from improperly obtained real estate funds. Then, stapled to the back of the packet, clearly included by the agent conducting the review, was my note. Vanessa came downstairs at the sound of silence. "What is it?" she asked, already annoyed. "Why are you just sitting there?" Daniel did not answer. He simply handed her the packet. She read it. Her mouth opened once, then nothing came out. Finally, she croaked. You turned us in, didn't you?" I didn't need to be there to know exactly how her voice sounded. Daniel didn't speak. But that night, in a public statement prepared for their legal counsel, they asked if I had made the report. I sent a letter in response, through Carol's office. "No," it read. "I just corrected your math." 3 days later, Vanessa was let go from her company. The HR department cited potential conflict of interest due to ongoing investigations. A week after that, Daniel's accounts were frozen. The IRS had traced the shell company used to receive the equity loan from the house. The funds were not only improperly reported, they were also reclassified as income, not investment capital. Back taxes, penalties, fees. The agency began asset recovery proceedings. They seized the vehicle Vanessa leased under the company's name. The condo in her sister's name, flagged for audit. Even the vacation trust Daniel had set up for their supposed nonprofit was pulled for scrutiny. Eventually, Daniel was placed on the federal Do Not Do Business With list, prohibiting him from acting as managing member of any LLC for a minimum of 10 years. He tried to file for relief, but his lawyer advised against contesting too loudly. The recordings from the courtroom, especially the one where he said, "We'll fill in the rest," were already circulating in closed tax fraud forums. Vanessa's reputation crumbled in silence. No viral videos this time, no heartfelt live streams, just silence, press releases, and lawyers on retainer. As for me, I spent that winter tending to a small herb garden on my apartment balcony. I volunteered once a week at the local library. I drank chamomile tea and sorted through old letters from Richard, cataloging them carefully in a binder I labeled "What Love Actually Is." Sometimes I smiled at the irony. He called me a leech. And now, the one feeding was the IRS, methodical, relentless, and perfectly legal. But I did not feel vengeance. What I felt was correction, a realignment, an audit not just of numbers, but of values. And for the first time in a long time, balance had been restored. 1 year later, the house no longer smelled like betrayal. The floors had been refinished, the kitchen restored to its original warmth, sunlight pouring through the windows at just the right slant. But what truly transformed it wasn't the paint or the plaster. It was purpose. The Morgan Lake House was now home to the Lasana Morgan Center for Elder Legal Protection. The brass plaque by the front gate gleamed under the midday sunday. It read, "Built from memory, preserved by justice." Inside, retired lawyers volunteered on Tuesdays. Counselors held sessions for seniors navigating estate planning. On weekends, local students helped digitize handwritten wills into secure archives. It was not just a house anymore. It was proof. Proof that what was taken can be reclaimed. That silence can grow teeth. That justice, when patient, is unforgettable. On the anniversary of the grand opening, they came. Daniel and Vanessa. He wore a wrinkled shirt. She carried flowers, roses, red and white, as if symbolism could erase history. They stood outside the black iron gate, staring through like children pressed against a candy store window. A young security guard stepped forward. Names? Daniel cleared his throat. Daniel Morgan, this is my wife. The guard checked the clipboard, then shook his head. Court-ordered restrictions still active. You're not allowed within 50 feet of the premises. I'm going to need you to step back. Vanessa's voice cracked. We just want to talk to her. The guard didn't flinch. Vanessa looked up at the house. The flowers drooped slightly in her hand. Her voice turned desperate. We lost everything. Are you happy now? I was standing just inside the glass doors, invisible behind the curtain. I stepped out. The air was crisp. Autumn was just beginning to kiss the trees. I met their eyes, both of them. Daniel's face looked older than it should have. Vanessa's was pale, makeup stiff against her regret. I did not move closer. I simply said, steady as the wind that stirred the birch leaves, no, I'm not happy. A pause. Vanessa blinked. I continued. I'm at peace. You mistook peace for weakness. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but I had already turned away. They stood there a moment longer, wilting in silence. As they turned to go, Vanessa glanced back one last time and caught sight of something inside the foyer. Mounted on the wall, perfectly framed in glass, hung a letter. The IRS audit notice. At the bottom of the frame, engraved in gold. The IR's letter that found the right name. I watched from upstairs as they froze in place. There were no more words. They walked away. And I returned to my office. Later that evening, I made my way to the bench at the back of the property just by the edge of the lake. The breeze picked up gently, rustling the pages of the leather-bound journal I always carried. Inside it, taped to one page, was a faded photograph, a family of 3 standing in front of this very house. Richard's arm around my shoulder. Daniel, no older than 6, grinning, holding a popsicle that had begun to melt down his arm. I stared at it for a long while. Then I whispered, to no one and everyone. You know, son, I once wanted to leave you everything. The house, the land, the stories inside it. But you sold it twice, not just for money, but for the kind of wealth no one recovers from. Character. The water lapped at the shore, calm and patient. I closed the journal, resting it in my lap. Then, quietly, with the hush of someone who'd finally settled the last page of a long story, I said, and now, the world finally collected its due. The camera would pull back here, if this were a film. The lake reflecting the house, the brass plaque catching one last glint of sunlight, the woman on the bench, silver hair dancing in the wind, wrapped in the weightless calm that comes only after justice has spoken. No fireworks, no applause, just peace. Earned. Revenge served not by rage, but by record. If you've listened this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story about a house. It was about the silence that people mistake for surrender. About the quiet women, mothers, widows, grandmothers, who remember everything, even when the world forgets them. Justice doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a letter, a courtroom ruling, or the simple act of standing up and saying, enough. And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a name, a face, a moment where you were made to feel small or forgotten, don't let it go silent. Leave a comment if this reminded you of someone. Share it with anyone who needs to remember that justice has no expiration date. And if you want more stories like this from the quietest woman in the room, hit that subscribe button to join me here on Grandma True Stories. Until next time, take care of your memories, because one day they might just take care of you.